This story happened about 6 years ago now, but still makes me wonder what would have happened if I didn't follow my gut instinct. I've always been very aware of my surroundings. Growing up, my parents and grandparents always instilled in my sister and I to be well aware of your surroundings, especially when you're alone, and to follow your gut instinct if you feel like the situation you're in is off. Because of this, I've always left situations I felt a bad vibe from. No matter if things didn't seem too strange to others, why take the risk? I feel like your body knows what's up even if you can't see it. So anyways, fast forward to this day. I never finished high school, so now I was trying to get my GED so that I could get into college. The college I was doing the program at was in the same city as me. However, I didn't have a car nor drove, so I had to take the bus to and from classes when I had them. Usually the bus ride altogether took about 45 minutes, and I had to transfer onto a second bus at one point. Up until this point, nothing weird or bad had ever happened to me on my journey to classes. On this particular day, I had finished my classes and was waiting for the first bus to go home. Since my classes weren't regular classes, I usually finished before most of the students in the actual college classes got out. I only had about 1 to 2 classes a day, which meant most of the time there weren't too many others waiting for the bus at the same time as me. The bus I was waiting for finally pulls up, and I get on as usual. I go grab a seat at the front of the bus and notice there's absolutely no one else on the bus but me. So I get happy knowing there won't be many stops on my ride home, and therefore I'll get there quicker. About 2 stops later, the bus stops and my passenger gets on. I think nothing of it at first, and I'm still glad there's only one other person because it'll still be a quick ride. As the man walks to take a seat on the bus, instead of sitting on the opposite side or the back, he sits right beside me, not even a seat over. Literally, right beside me. Now I'm thinking this is strange because usually when I get on the bus, if there's plenty of empty seats, I won't pick a seat right next to someone. I usually enjoy sitting by myself, listening to music on the ride, so I decided to get up and go to the back of the bus. While I'm sitting in the back listening to music, the male passenger keeps staring up at me every few seconds, and it's starting to make me feel uneasy. Up until this point, I didn't really have any alarm bells going off in my head, but the more he kept looking up at me, the more I started to get bad vibes. I eventually started having really strong gut feeling like I needed to get off this bus. I can't describe it, but the bad vibes I was getting was making me feel like super uneasy. I decided I was going to get off at the next intersection where a stop was. Just in case he decided to do anything or follow me, at least I wouldn't be on a side street alone with no one there. So the next intersection stop is coming up, and I press the button on the bus to be let off. As the bus is about to pull over and stop, I get up to walk to the door and notice the male passenger get up too. I think that's really weird. I decided to get off the front of the bus by the driver versus the back, and the male passenger gets off with me. At this point, I'm freaked out and walk ahead a bit and notice that he follows me. The bus is at a red light at the stop and the doors are still open, so I decided to get back onto the bus thinking this man won't follow me, but I was wrong. He follows me back onto the bus. At this point, I'm really freaked out and the bus driver closes the door to drive away. I immediately say, "Sorry, I gotta get off at the stop." And he opens them again, and I notice the male passenger is again about to get up to get off with me. Thankfully, the bus driver closed the doors and drove off. I don't know if he knew the man was following me and decided to not let him off, or if he just wanted to drive away. But as the bus pulled away, I noticed the man who followed me standing at the front of the bus staring at me. At this point, I'm glad he's away from me, but I decided not to wait for the next bus because I didn't know if he was going to be at the next stop waiting for me. I ended up calling my mom to come pick me up. I'm glad my gut instinct knew something was up, and I got off the bus before he followed me all the way home because I live on a side street that's about a 7-minute walk from the bus stop. So who knows what would have happened. So, sketchy man on the bus, let's not meet again. This attempted abduction happened during the winter in a university town in the middle of a weekday near the Rocky Mountains. The year was 1989 or 1990. I had just completed my associate's degree and had returned to my parents' home. I was about 20 and I'm female. Both my parents and my 2 sisters who lived at home were at school or work. I had a few dollars and decided to walk to a grocery store that was about 3 to 4 blocks away. My shopping went smoothly. I checked out, and as I left the checkout stand, I saw 2 other men enter the store. The men were dressed appropriately for the weather. Both were 6 foot tall, maybe as tall as 6'2", and dark-haired. They were similar in build and coloring. They could have been related. Nothing should have been remarkable about them, but their behavior was off. They had walked in and then stood between the main entrance and the checkout stands looking around. They had not headed straight to the aisles to shop. Then one of them noticed me. He stared at me and smacked the other guy lightly and directed him to see me. I felt as if I had been lit by a spotlight. Now, I've never been the kind of gal men notice. I was overweight then, and I still am, and I don't think that I'm that pretty. I very nearly went looking for a security guard, and I ended up wishing I had. I decided I was being paranoid. I gave the two men a wide berth, and ignoring my instincts and the two men, I left the store. As I crossed the wide parking lot, I saw an older car pull out of the parking lot going the same direction as myself. The car was distinctive, and I'm not good at identifying cars. This was a two-tone vehicle, dark blue and cream, that looked like it was from the 1970s. To get home, I had to cross a busier road, then walk down a very quiet residential road for at least 2 blocks, before turning a corner and walking about a half block to our small apartment complex. I happen to know most of our neighbors on that quiet street, or at least know them enough to know that most of the residents would not be home during the day. I had barely started down the first residential block when the same 1970s car came towards me down the block. The two men from the store were inside and stared at me as they drove slowly by. At this point, I was sure I wouldn't make it to our apartment building before they tried to get to me. And I was looking at each home, trying to remember if any of them were retired or a stay-at-home parent, but I couldn't be sure anyone would be home. As the car came up behind me, driving very, very slowly, I had an idea. I got my keys out and I began to jangle them and find my house key. The car pulled to the curb just ahead of me and the passenger opened his door to get out, and I acted as if I couldn't see them and headed up the nearest walkway to the closest house. I acted as if I was arriving home. I got to the porch, put down my bag, and went to put my key in the lock, a lock that it wouldn't fit. I was turned enough to see them and the passenger stayed in the car, then closed the door and they sped away. I ran as fast as I could to our apartment. I did not call the police because all I had as evidence was a strange story. I was paranoid for days about going anywhere alone. I told my parents, and I think my dad took me more seriously than my mom did. And to the two guys I met in the grocery store, let's not meet. I believe this was April of 2018. I'd gone to Colorado for a concert and was just driving around checking everything out before and after. The day before the concert, I'm driving through the Rockies because I thought it'd be cool, I guess. It was already probably 9 p.m. at this point. I get to a gas station and there's an old lady with a giant suitcase. I went inside, bought a pack of Swishers, got gas, and as I was leaving, she asked me for a ride. Being young and stupid, I said, "Sure, hop in, ma'am." Then she had me get her giant suitcase in my back seat and we were off. The ride started off pretty normal at first, just talked about life. She did most of the talking, mostly about her kids and family. She claimed she was hitchhiking to Alaska for some insane reason I can't remember. Anyways, I had a joint that I decided to give her and let her smoke while we were driving, not sure why. Maybe to get her to shut up a little bit. Eventually, she asked if I want to try her weed, but keeps mentioning how it tastes funny, which was a red flag, so I politely said no. Then she started getting weird, talking about homeless camps where people smoke meth. Then I actually got a good look at her and realized she was probably like 40 years old, a tweaker, and not as old as I thought she was. Also, I think I saw an Adam's apple and that it could have been a dude. She starts pointing out the rest stop signs or whatever, which were like 100+ miles out, and was trying to convince me to go to one with her and kept saying,
"I don't have any money, but some people will blow you if you give them a ride."
And at this point, I'm actually driving like a maniac in the middle of a pretty bad snowstorm at the time, in hopes that I'm more visible and noticeable to people if anything were to happen. Finally, we get to a town on the opposite side of the Rockies from Denver, and I pull up to a gas station and say, "Okay, I gotta go back to Denver and get some sleep now. I'm dropping you off here." And all she said was,
"You're a very smart young man."
And I helped her unload the suitcase and left thanking God I was still breathing. If any of my actions are questioned, this was at a time in my life where I was particularly lost and not in a good mental state at all. I definitely shouldn't have been roaming Colorado by myself. As a smaller guy, no weapon aside from a knife, I am incredibly lucky.